Welcome to the Animation Industry Podcast. My name is Terry, and pizza is my love language. Today's chat is with animator, writer, producer, development executive, and currently the chief content officer at Ottawa-based Mercury Filmworks, Heath Kenny. His current role at Mercury sees him managing the development team and heading up their content strategy, but in the past he's worked on projects like Robot Boy, the Gorillaz music videos, and Noddy Toyland Detective. In our chat, he's going to share his journey from New Zealand to Canada, as well as exactly how to make the leap from maker to manager. But first, this episode is sponsored by my friends at Cloud Stop Motion, who've created possibly the easiest way to start animating from your phone, tablet, laptop, or desktop in seconds. Simply go to cloudstopmotion.com and click Start Animating. Their software works in any modern browser, and your files are instantly saved to the cloud. The best part is that they are completely free to use, up to 500 megabytes of storage, which is actually quite a lot. And they're especially useful if you're teaching a class, since you can create an organization account which comes with 2 gigabytes of free storage as standard and allows the creation of unlimited student groups and profiles, all of whose projects and work you can view for yourself from your admin account. Go to cloudstopmotion.com, and I've included a link to that in the description of this podcast, so check that out to see how easy it is to get started now. Okay, without further ado, let's jump in. Hi Heath, how are you?
I'm very well, Terry. How are you?
I'm very well as well. So you were just, heading up the Ottawa Animation Festival. How it was wrapping up the Ottawa Animation Festival that you did all by yourself?
Don't tell Stephanie, she's going to be very upset.
Yeah.
So the festival itself was great. I mean, I love community events, especially animation community events, like things that support the community and help me, I would say, get to know my local community. And as a new resident of Canada, it's been great, that opportunity for me to connect with people and get to know them. And I think the pitch of this thing for us as a company, but also me as an individual, has been a really great way for me to reach out and get to know the community that I'm now part of.
Hey, I mean, that's kind of how we met last year through the Pitch This competition thing. Like, you were super great and supportive in that. And here we are talking later, and you're on my podcast. What's up?
That's it. That's how it works.
That's it. Community, festivals, podcast, talking. Anyways. Yeah.
Well, that's totally it. That's totally it.
Yeah, I'm super interested to hear kind of your backstory, because you came from New Zealand, where there isn't much of a animation scene, and you've moved your whole self to Canada very recently to pursue animation forever. So, like, tell me, how hard was it starting in a country that doesn't have a big industry, lots of networking opportunities, festivals, mentor? Like, how do you even start when you're in a place that doesn't have a supportive industry?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. I mean, I can't speak to what it's like now, because obviously that was like 100 years ago, because I'm obviously 200 years old. But it was like when I guess it was in the 1990s when I was there, and it was it was a different scene, and there wasn't much going on at all. Like, since obviously there's Lord of the Rings and Weta, and there's lots of CGI stuff happening out there, and there's more folks doing stuff there now than there ever was, kind of thing. But when I was starting out, there really wasn't much. So I remember when I was leaving school, I was told that animation wasn't a real job, and it's done in Asia, and it's not done in, like, there's no way I could do it in New Zealand. And cartoons kind of magically appear on the screen, and like, who knows how they get made. So I did a whole other job, career path thing for 4 or 5 years after leaving leaving school. And then I sort of was encouraged by when I was doing my apprenticeship as a cabinet maker, I was encouraged by my teacher to take a shot. He was like, well, it's now or never. You're young enough, just go for it. So
So you're making cabinets for like 5 years, doing this apprenticeship, and you're like, woodworking cabinet teacher is like, listen, you're great at cabinets, but you can't stop talking about animation, so just go do it. Like, that's
what?
It. So you were like pretty at it. You were like talking about it all enough and trying it out that people were noticing.
Yeah. No, I was like, it's kind of, I guess people call it a side hustle now, but it wasn't that organized or calculated. I was just kind of doing it because that's what I like to do. And so I was like, I was always drawing comic books and just trying to figure out how to do things. I think I even had a published comic book at one point for a surf magazine or something, and I was just kind of doing stuff all the time. And then yeah, and then I think his name was Andrew Pawson. It seems like so long ago now. Who was just a super nerd of like cabinet making and woodworking, and he just taught me so much stuff about process and how to understand, the correct way to go about manufacturing something, like whatever it is. So, being super creative up front, and then being super disciplined down the line as you went to executing on a wacky, whimsical idea.
It
And so he
sounds like
taught
a
me more.
pipeline already.
That's it. He taught me more about creativity, I think, than I've ever learned from an animation school. Anyway,
Oh
so then I
wow! So
went
your animation schooling was cabinetry.
pretty much, pretty much. I mean, it's weird, but it's true. Anyway, so I went to animation school. I bit the bullet, sort of sold everything I owned, my car, my surfboards, everything, and I paid for my first year of animation school, which was terrifying. And I, burnt loads of bridges, and off I went, because I was like, I had to make sure I couldn't turn around and come back, because it was too easy to come back to the safety of what I knew. And so I was like, I need to jump in there, fully
Wow.
committed. And then, yeah, I went into animation school, and it was terrifying. And I felt totally. You imagine coming from a construction site to going into an animation school is like such a culture shock for me. I was totally lost. It was probably more of a culture shock doing that, going from a small town of 20,000 people to an animation school in Auckland City, which is 1 million people. It's more of a culture shock doing that than it was going from Auckland to London.
Wow. What? That's crazy.
It's totally crazy.
So you're already an adult working in the industry for years, and then you sold everything you had, burned your bridges on purpose so you couldn't go back. You're like, all of my eggs are in this one basket.
Yep.
And what was that like? What did it feel like to do that? Like like there's a moment where you like, I have to sell everything I have to make this happen. Like I have to start fresh from everything I've built.
I was totally absurd. I mean, I got into a huge argument with my father at the time. He was like, "There's no way you can do this. This is absurd." He was a carpenter, so there's no way he understood anything that was going on. And and also, very physical man. He wasn't afraid of getting into it, as it were. And so he was just like, "This is not possible. You can't do this." And so it felt very much like a rebellious act, in every way you can think of.
Wow. So like what gave you the confidence to go all in then? Because like you're going against your family, everything you've known, you're like starting fresh into the big unknown where you don't even know if you're going to succeed or fail.
I think it was I don't know if it was confidence, to be honest. I think it was the fear of not doing it. I remember distinctly looking around, and apart from Andrew, who was my mentor at the time, which I didn't realize how much of a special man he was. But looking around, I was like, I don't want to be in this place and be stuck in this job, right?
Yeah.
I feel like the lane's too narrow, and I want to be a creative person. I remember with Andrew, everything seemed possible, and then with everyone else, nothing seemed possible. It was like you're making boxes and simple geometrical shapes, and also I could see the sort of end of what we were doing coming through automation. I could see that the industry was going to change rapidly, and that was before IKEA. It wasn't really a thing then. So automation was coming, and we weren't going to be so relevant anymore as well. So
Yeah.
I just had the fear of staying still felt like death to me somehow. I felt like I needed to go and try it.
Wow. That makes a lot of sense. So how does it feel now coming so far? You've done it all. You're in a totally different part of the world, complete opposite side of the world. You've done it all, animation, directing, etc. Like how does it feel now that you just told me that you gave up everything at one point in your life and basically said like, I have to start fresh and do this, and now you've done it? Like how does that feel?
Well, it feels like some things never change. That's how it feels. It feels like I think if you're looking for genuine growth, I think you have to step into those uncomfortable areas of your life. And I think that's the truth of it, is that it doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. We all have like work to do on ourselves, and I think that the most valuable stuff is when you step into those areas of where you're not comfortable, and you need to grow and change, right? And so I think that if anything, it's given me the courage to do that stuff,
Yeah,
to
totally.
sort of look at something and say, okay, yeah, I'm afraid of that, or I'm nervous about that, or I'm apprehensive at least, and then kind of look at it and say, well, that's not a reason not to do it.
Right. And you have this reference point in your mind that
Yeah.
did it at one point when, you know, the stakes were the highest. Have you ever felt that feeling again, where if you stay put, you know, you're afraid to stay where you are and you have to push yourself to move on or move to somewhere else? Like, I know you've traveled to different countries and taken on different positions and whatnot. Has that feeling that you had back then in carpentry ever come back in animation?
Yeah, I think as soon as you start to feel comfortable and like you've got some level of expertise, I think it sneaks in, right? It sneaks in, and then all of a sudden it's like, I'm feeling comfortable, confident, I know what I'm doing, and then change obviously is inevitable. And then we work in an industry that's constantly changing, and I think that you have to be ready to you have to be ready to move and make those changes, whether it's move geographically or move laterally within the same company you're in, or even just move internally with what you're comfortable doing. I think well, my personal point of view is you should embrace change and you should look for it. I know that's not everybody's, but I think that, you know, since I made a conscious choice to get involved in development specifically, and that you can't survive, I don't believe, in development unless you have a growth mindset and you're willing to change constantly and also constantly question what you believe.
Well, okay, so I get that from like a theological standpoint, but what you just said in development, what from a practical standpoint, what do you mean? Do you have to change constantly and like believe in it?
Well, like the world is changing, right, all the time around us, and what was acceptable once upon a time is not acceptable now. What the marketplace is looking for now is maybe not what it'll be looking for tomorrow. Because animation takes so long to develop or to produce, you have to be kind of looking ahead and seeking, opportunities to change and do things differently, and new voices, new stories to tell, and they don't look like anything that was here yesterday. And I think that's the thing that someone once said to me, was that, if we were to develop SpongeBob today, it would not look like SpongeBob.
Yeah, totally. So like, what are, I guess, maybe like three things you do to constantly keep yourself on your toes? Like, I think you mentioned one where it's like, look for new creators or like voices or whatnot, like, that keep you going fresh.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think engaging with like a diverse group of like creative people, I think is one thing for sure. One thing I've learned through training as a facilitator is to embrace the critical voices. Like, don't shy away from those that have critical things to say. Like, that's actually a really informative piece of the puzzle. And I know that people talk about setting yourself up for success, and I think that is important, but I would say also set yourself up to fail safely. That's the other thing.
Okay. One more question on this tangent. You said, say I'm like sitting in my job right now and I'm feeling really comfy and I'm feeling like I need a change. How would I go about doing that? Do I like specifically look for opportunities that I feel are uncomfortable? Do I wait for something to come my way? Am I like constantly on the hunt for like, I'm maybe like a senior animator, like I don't know where to go. Should I start trying to get into directing or management? Like how do I make sure that I'm evolving when I feel I'm ready?
Yeah, okay, that's a great question, and I think that's a question that a lot of people can relate to. I think the thing I try and sort of share with everybody in terms of my personal experience is that, I think it's good to have lofty goals, but I think you need pragmatic plans to go along with those lofty goals. So if we look
Sounds
at
like a
like,
book, Lofty Goals and Pragmatic Plans.
yeah, exactly, right.
Like,
Exactly. It's like a $3 self-help book. Anyway, so it's if you're looking at a large goal, right, which I think you should, and you should say, why not me, instead of like, that can't be me. You should say, well, why not me? And if it was me, how would I go about that? So then, look at your lofty goal, and then walk backwards to where you are today, and then concentrate on the next first step. It's like, okay, what is the and that plan I just mapped out. What is the first step? So maybe the first step is going to see my supervisor and asking for a performance review, or maybe it is literally asking for what I want. Maybe it's like setting up a meeting to ask for it, right? But whatever that first step is, you need some steps. You need some first steps, and then I think the idea is like, see every step like a learning mission. I'm seeking information. So what I want to do is, if the response is, well, you can't be a director today because you're a background designer, and it's like, okay, but if I was to be a director, what would I need to do?
yeah.
What are the skills I'm missing? What do I need to do? For example, um, there was a background designer that I worked with on Robot Boy season 2, and he subsequently worked with me on a bunch of different things. And uh, he said to me, "I want to be a director." And I said, "Well, because you come from a background, you have really strong layout skills. Like you can really like compose a shot very, very well." I said, "What you're missing is, character posing and ability to draw characters." I said, "Because if you can do that, then you can start storyboarding. And if you can start storyboarding, you can start telling stories. And if you can start telling stories, then you're starting to become a director. So how about we step it back like that? And then let's start with the first step." And I gave him a whole bunch of books, and he took them all, photocopied them, started working on character posing, and kept sharing it with me. And then I got him his first storyboarding gig, where he worked as a fixer, like someone doing basically cleans and fixing on and punch ups on storyboard sequences. And then he got his first storyboard to do on a show that he was actually supervising the background. So I asked the production manager if they could give him a board with some extra time, and he'll do it in parallel with what he's currently doing as a layout supervisor, because he could do that stuff with his eyes closed, but he could not do the other stuff. So he had a little bit extra time to work on it slowly during the sort of series schedule. But he got to complete his first 11-minute board, and then he learned a lot from doing that. And long story short, he got to direct his first short development episode, like teaser thing, with me. And then he actually directed his first show, which was for Gaumont. It was called Belle and Sebastien, and his name is Lionel Francois, and he's
Wow.
top man.
What an incredible story. Podcast over. I feel like I feel like that's a great case study example if I ever heard one. That's amazing.
And but there's tons of them. There's tons of them
Totally,
like that.
totally.
And for me, it's about like breaking it down into a like, okay, what are the pragmatic steps, and are you willing to do that?
Totally. I think the willingness is key because, like, for instance, maybe this is like maybe an uncomfortable thing, but maybe he had to take a step down in pay to take a storyboard fixer role when, he knew it was on path to becoming this thing. I'm not saying he did, but to become this thing that he actually wanted down the road. When I think that some people aren't willing to take risks like that to get where they go.
Totally. And he took all kinds of personal risks, and he spent prolonged periods of time working in development, which everybody knows is kind of like, there's stop and start work, and it's frustrating, and it's and I'm sure he said no to things that I didn't even know about during that period of time, so he could stay doing that work. So we all make personal sacrifices. The important thing is that it's leading somewhere, right? You don't want to be doing that in the sort of an abusive relationship, which would bring me to my second thing, which would be find trustworthy kind of accountability buddies, like people that you can count on to be honest with you. Because that when I was offered the job as to take over as director on Robot Boy season 2, I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. Like, can I really do this? I haven't directed such long format stuff before, and I spoke to a good friend of mine about it, and he basically said, look, all these people believe in you. They're offering you this job. If you don't believe in yourself, at least trust them that they see something in you, and give yourself the chance.
Yeah, totally. That's really good advice. And it's like, imposter syndrome is such a big thing in animators' mindsets and my mindset, et cetera. But it's like kind of good to have that in mind. Somebody else is trusting me. Let's see what happens. I'll do my best.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as a manager, I think a lot of people need to realize that they have that power to empower and embolden somebody just by showing them support, showing, I believe in you. Even if you don't, I do. I believe in you. You can do this.
Nice, cool. Let's get back to your journey a little bit more. So you went to animation school. It was a huge culture shock. Yep. Then how did you end up in London after school?
Yeah, so that's a kind of a long story, but I'll make it short. So I left.
Give me the Coles notes.
Yeah, exactly.
You said you were 200 years old. I don't need.
Exactly. I left school prematurely and started Flux Animation with Brent Chambers. Brent was kind enough to let me sleep in his basement and stay with him to start the studio together, which was crazy. I mean, it was Brent's studio, but I was definitely like jumping at the opportunity to help start something. I bounced around in New Zealand doing animation work on Disney's TV shows and all various other things that were happening at the time. They were just kind of like trickling in and out of the country, sorry. And then I got to a point where I was like, I want to work on films and sort of things with bigger budgets and longer schedules. And so I just decided to bite the bullet and go to London because I saw a Gorillaz music video. I was sleeping on a friend's couch and I saw, I think it was Tomorrow Comes Today or something like that. And I was like, oh my God, I want to do that. It's like super smart posing, limited animation. These people are on to something. So I left to London and I turned up there and all the work had dried up and there was no jobs.
Wow, great.
Perfect.
Oh no. So the whole pragmatic plans thing didn't really
Well, that was see, look, yeah, I was young. I wasn't learning much there. So it wasn't very pragmatic. It was just like it was on a whim. I was just like, I'm out of here. So
wow.
but that whole
But you
thing, I
didn't,
was
it doesn't sound like you had much tying you to stay in New Zealand, really. You said you were hopping around a lot, etc. So it sounds like
yeah, the work was unstable at best and you know, and I was young. I didn't really know what was going on. I didn't really understand anything. So I was just like, oh, I just like this. I want to try it. And so I was like, I'll give it a go. So I literally like had a backpack full of stuff. And I also lived in an apartment in Auckland that had like 9 people in it. And a lot of them were European, like the majority were European. So I had this sort of romance about Europe as well. I was like, I got to go to Europe. Europe's going to be amazing. And so I arrived in London and then it was tough. Like I got off the plane and the exchange rate had like the New Zealand dollar had like bottomed out. It was like I think the pound was like 4 times the dollar. So I already lost a bunch of money by the time I left New Zealand and arrived in London. And then no one was hiring. Everyone was like, oh, we only hire people that are they were literally the questions were where have you worked before? Who do you know? And you know, what's the other one? I can't remember. There's another leading question. And of course my answer was no to all of those. So I don't know anybody, I haven't worked anywhere before. I have a reel, can I send it in kind of thing? And everyone was like, yeah, send your reel in, and then just nothing. Crickets. Didn't hear from anybody. So it was so difficult to get in anywhere. And then everyone was like, well, all the features have left town. So all the feature animators are now doing commercials. So there's no work on commercials either. So there's no work anywhere. So so it was like, oh God, what have I done? You know, and then I literally, I remember I applied to work in a bar for £3 an hour. I was like, oh my God. And then and I was on 25 New Zealand dollars a foot when I left, which is just the foot of film. We used to get paid on a foot of film, which is insane. And so and I arrived in London and I was like, oh God, I'm going to die. This is going to be awful. And then my old teacher from animation school, she was with her boyfriend working at a small studio in London. And she said to me, hey, we're just leaving for Berlin. They haven't had time to look for anybody. Just go in there now. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. So I called them and convinced them that I was just around the corner, which I wasn't at all. And then I crossed London to get there and to take my reel in personally because I realized that no one was looking at them if you sent them in. And then yeah, long story short, Phil Valentine hired me at Espresso Animation and it changed my life.
wow, that's incredible. I mean, like maybe you got to London a little bit early. You could have showed up a few weeks later and still got the same opportunity. But if you didn't go on that whim, then we wouldn't be talking here. Well, we may be talking just in a different capacity.
Totally. And
Incredible.
but I think that ultimately I think that's the big learning for me in all this, even though it was irresponsible, I didn't really have a plan, all that kind of stuff. I certainly didn't do enough research. But the truth of it is if you wait for the perfect sort of wave to come your way, if you sit on the beach and wait for the perfect wave, by the time you paddle out there to wherever the wave is, you'll have missed it. You've missed it. You're too late. You've got to be out there swimming around in the muck with everybody else for opportunities to come. And if you don't take that risk of failure, then nothing will ever happen.
Totally, totally. Wow. That's getting my wheels turning. That's interesting. So, okay, so you're in London for a while. How did you get to give me the Coles notes of how that went and how you came to Canada and how you moved
Yeah,
from
so yeah, quick I guess milestones would be I worked for Espresso for many years. Phil gave me loads of opportunities. I got to shoot some live action in LA, travel around a bit. One of those trips I was in, where was I? I was in San Francisco and I met Robert Valley, who introduced me to Pete Candelan, who was directing Gorillaz at the time. And he said, hey, what are you doing? I said, I live in London. He said, me too. What are you doing on Monday? I said, nothing. He said, come into the office. I came to the office, started working on Gorillaz, spent a year on Gorillaz. During a gap between music videos, a friend of mine, Charlie Bean, gave me an opportunity to do a board on Robot Boy. which was being done in Paris. Then he left after season 1 and said, we need a director. Would you be interested in coming over and working with Bob Camp? I was like, great, let's do that. I want to learn about TV. So I came over and worked on that show, which led to me getting my job at Alphanim as a creative director, where I set up my first development studio. And then that was bought by Gaumont, where I became executive producer and I think creative VP or something. And then that's where I expanded the development studio and got to do a co-production with Mercury Filmworks in Canada called Atomic Puppet. And it was thanks to that co-production that I met Chantal Ling and Clint Eland, which led to me getting the current job that I have at Mercury Filmworks, Chief Content Officer.
What a ride. What a crazy ride.
It's a bit weird when you say it like that.
10 years in the making and it's like 30 seconds to explain.
It's completely
okay. So tell me what a chief content officer does. And is that a typical role at a lot of studios?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably not. I'd say it's somewhat of a luxury to have someone in that role. I think it's one of those roles that can kind of mean a lot of things. Like there can be a commercial component, there can be obviously a creative component. I think it depends what the studio needs, I guess, and it also depends on the profile of the individual that you hire. So some people you can hire in that role, and they're really coming from a commercial background, so they're here to sort of business development, that kind of thing. And other people, they can be much more kind of like focused on the creative, like the editorial line of whatever the company's like doing from a creative standpoint. And my current role is both of those things. So I have a commercial component to it, and I also have a creative component. And so the idea is that we are building an additional piece to this company's kind of puzzle. We're adding on to what is already here. Mercury is a company built on technical excellence. They've done some of the most amazing 2D animation I think that there is in the industry. I've always been a huge fan, and to join the company and have the opportunity to build something alongside that is remarkable and really quite amazing. And the goal is to try and shape a place where we can start telling our own stories and build a genuine originals department, and start to create our own intellectual property that we can then, obviously produce, manage, and distribute around the world. Not that we're building a distribution platform yet, but right now it's just about creating shows.
So let me reiterate that back to you. Your job is twofold. One, you're developing commercial side of the business, and commercial, you mean like advertisements? No,
in terms of when I say commercial, I mean like financial, right? So and with a goal to sell something, right? So ultimately there is a commercial, quote unquote, commercial goal where we're trying to sell a product of some kind, right? So in this particular case, what we're doing is we're trying to develop show ideas that will turn into because I think intellectual property is a term that's kind of thrown around, I think, too lightly. I mean, I think that an idea, I have ideas every 2 minutes. I have so many ideas, of boxes full of them, but that doesn't make it an intellectual property. It makes it an idea that that's fine and that's great, and I'm sure many people have the same or similar ideas, or maybe better ideas or whatever. But I think once you try and seek to monetize an idea, it becomes something else. And I think that having worked in France for a long time, there is a really I think fantastic understanding of what makes an intellectual property and what creators' rights look like and authors' rights and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's a whole other subject. But I definitely think I have a deep respect for that. But I just think that if you're talking about Lego as an intellectual property, or a Marvel character, or that's one thing, But if you're talking about an individual's idea that they've just come up with and they want to sort of turn it into something, I think that's a different story. And I think that's where we're starting most of the time, with something that doesn't have a lot of notoriety. People don't know about it. It's maybe a fresh idea, or maybe it's an idea that's been done 100 times before, but maybe the real interest is finding a fresh way to execute on that idea. I don't know, but I think that an intellectual property is something you build over time. But you start out with an idea, and I think that's the thing, really. I think that for me, what we're trying to do is we're trying to take ideas, turn them into compelling stories that people can relate to, that hopefully will eventually turn into an intellectual property of some value.
Yeah, totally. And so that's one side, and the other side is developing Sounds very similar. You're developing your own IPs to produce yourselves.
Yeah, no, so I think that the one side is the commercial side of that, which is everything we just talked about.
Yeah.
The other side of it is about building process, so and building an environment within which people can be creative, right? And also influencing the editorial, let's say, style of the how the company expresses itself, right? And so I think in order to do that correctly, you have to spend a lot of time listening to the people that make up the company, and also I think you have to, take it slow. You have to figure out, okay, well, how are we going to work together, and how can I be of service to this community and this company, and try and find a way that we can express ourselves creatively that's not only safe but also I think unique to us.
Amazing. So maybe I'm projecting, correct me if I'm wrong. I love this idea from what I get from it, but you're trying to say, we have however many employees,
Yeah.
And they all have creative visions and they'll work on stuff for us every single day. How can we turn, their personal aspirations and creative visions into this, and create a process to draw those in and actually make them happen through this company, and for them
Yep.
to be a part of that?
That's definitely part of it, and I think that let's say that would be a side effect of a healthy creative environment. Like,
Yeah.
I think that not all artists are storytellers, and not all
Totally.
like folks that want to be like. I think there's a big difference between an expert in the field and being creative. You don't have to be like the world's best animator to tell a great story, or to tell a great story. Sorry, you don't have to be the world's best draftsperson to illustrate a children's book. You don't have to be the best songwriter to be a great singer, or vice versa. So I think that I think the first thing you need to do, in my experience, is again to focus on, which has become very much my mission in the way I go about doing things, is to create a safe place to be creative, and then a creative place to do business, and that's what I'm doing.
So are there any other examples of studios you can think of that have a well-oiled machine revolving around this content?
I mean, honestly, I don't really know many, but again, I haven't really worked in that many studios, like outside of well, because I spent so much time at Gilmore.
Totally,
right?
because
So,
I've talked to quite a number of studios through this podcast, and I'm like doing research all the time. And this sounds amazing. Like, there's like a typical like studio owner wants to develop their own IP, and
right.
they like they do, and they get everybody at the studio to do that, or there's a studio that buys IPs from other creators, and then et cetera. But I love this like kind of homegrown like create from within kind of atmosphere. How do you, okay, so maybe this segues into something I want to talk about, which you recently did and recently released on YouTube, and I've watched them and they're amazing. How do you actually practically integrate that into studio life? Because you've got this pipeline, you've got deadlines, you've got all these shows to produce and create. How do you make time to also do this without running everybody dry, or working overtime, or getting all of your projects done and doing this at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, there are great questions. There's a lot of questions in there. There are great questions, but I think that if I was to, I guess that I'm going to try and give you a simple answer to a complex thing. So I think that the simplest approach for me is, again, first of all, what I had to do was get to know the studio, right? So I had to understand how the studio works, how things function, from accounting through to editing, or all the different stages of production. Like, get to know the our line producers, our production managers, and see what their pain points are and what they're struggling with. How what does quota look like? How do people what does an average animator's day look like? How do our art directors work? I had to learn all that stuff, right? Because it's specific to studios, right? Each studio is specific. And then based on that, then I had to figure out, okay, what does a process look like that allows us to collaborate with the rest of the studio in a constructive way? Because ultimately, we don't want to be doing something that disserves the studio, and we certainly don't want to be doing something that's disruptive to everyone's day-to-day kind of workload, right? So we have to be doing it responsibly, and we have to take the steps we need to make sure that it's structured and we have a process in place. So to your point about the shorts that were just released, the studio was setting up different ways to engage with the community, right? And so one of the ways that our CEO Clint Elan has these Wednesday morning meetings with 15 people at a time, with a goal to get through the entire company, right, and then start again. So the idea is to is to connect with people on a regular basis and just, have an open discussion, hear from them. And so one of the things that kept coming up was this idea of like, when is the company going to do shorts, some kind of shorts program? And my question was always, why would we do shorts? Like, what is the goal? I think that has to be super clear, because if it's some kind of prestige thing or a money making exercise or whatever it is, then it becomes a whole other managerial challenge, right? Like if it's like the Pixar shorts or the Disney shorts, where it's like it's this huge budget and it's like, requires its own production team and it requires all kinds of other things, then that's one, case in point. But then there's different, I know Titmouse do a 30-second animation thing on Fridays, I think. I'm not quite sure how it works, but I know they do something, and there's lots of studios that do different things. So my question was just like, what would ours look like, and what would be the point of it? And so I just looked at it from a point of view of like, okay, if I was animating here, like I used to animate on Disney shows back in the day, I think it's that the monotony of the sort of Groundhog Day effect of animating anything, like, because animation is long and it takes a long time, and every day starts to look the same and you're working away. And so I was like, well, we should offer something where people get to take a break, where they get to take a mental break, they get to take a break where they can just make something for themselves, and we don't own it. It's nothing to do with us. We're just providing the space for them to be able to do that. So what would the cadence look like for that? What would the scope of work look like, and how would we manage it? And that was our focus. And then the idea was to create an opportunity for people to take some time during work hours, during office hours, where they could focus on something that they wanted to make. Of course, one of the biggest errors that I think we all make when we start anything is we underestimate the amount of work, and we're overly optimistic. So I think the first round, I think one of the biggest takeaways for everyone is like, do something simple. And I think everyone tried to do something way more complex than perhaps they should have. We obviously jumped in and see if we could help to get them through it. The most important thing that came out of it is that they've all made something, and they all felt what it feels like to have that weight, the weight of making something, the weight of telling a story, the weight of trying to do something. So it comes back to that idea of creating a safe place for people to experiment, to try things out, to see how it feels. And then ultimately, if out of that someone stands up and says, hey, I love that, it feels like this is what I've always wanted to do and I want to do more of it, well, then we start to identify those that can become the storytellers that we are developing things moving forward. But again, it's not like it's some kind of like, okay, if I do this, then this will lead to this, and then this will lead to that, and then this, it's not that easy, and it's not that linear. But I do think you just have to create a lot of different opportunities in the company where people can reveal themselves as like, okay, I'm ready. I want to take this opportunity, and then it's up to you to create those opportunities.
Nice. So this is amazing, and I love this, and I love that Mercury is also allowing this to happen and wants this to happen. How many people ended up participating? Like percentage wise, like 10%, 100%, like did everybody jump on this?
So we opened it up to the studio. I don't know exactly how many submissions we got, but we I think it was like 15. So 15 submissions, maybe a little bit more. But it was lots of different varying types of submissions, and then out of that we were aiming to select 5, right? So we wanted to do 5 at a time, but then of course those folks knew the votes that weren't accepted, they knew that there was going to be another round coming up in October.
So the folks that didn't get accepted, they weren't working on the accepted ones? They were?
No.
Okay, so they're just like, sorry, you didn't.
It's an individual shorts program, yeah. So sorry you didn't make it this time round. There's going to be another selection, but there's varying reasons as well why people may not have been selected, because that's the other thing, is that we're trying to collaborate with the rest of the studio. So we always reach out to the production managers as well to see, like, how are things going on your deliveries? Would this be disruptive if we took this person out for these number of days, whatever it is, and they came to work with us for a while and did the short thing? And so sometimes it's like, oh, you know what? All 4 of those people are coming from one team, and they're like, you can't do it's just too many people at once. So sometimes like, well, I have to wait for the next round so we can sort of share the load a little bit. But anyway, there's lots of logistical things that we just have to try and figure out. So again, everybody's taken care of, because again, it's a team sport. Even though we may be managing these projects directly out of the development department, we're allowed to do this because other members of other teams are carrying that weight while those folks are out.
So you had 5 this round, and now that you've finished this, is this something that's going to be integrated forever, or test again, or like, what is the ultimate, if you could turn this into anything that you wanted based on the result you wanted, what would this be and look like?
Yeah, so the feedback we've been getting is that people want to do more. everyone found it quite difficult, quite challenging. I think that we need to keep reinforcing different skill sets in the studio so that people can do this kind of thing. We've reinvented our training program as well, which we're about to sort of roll out probably in January. Actually, we're doing our first iteration in November, but we'll tweak it and it will come out in January. But that's another way as well. If you're not fully autonomous in your ability to make a film or create something, the training system that we set up will allow you to sort of do that first. So you can go and learn about builds, or you can go and learn about this, or you can go and learn about that before you get into making your own short. So there's going to be different layers to it, but ultimately, I think what would be really great is that it builds in popularity, and then I think ultimately it'd be great if we can have maybe a celebratory short where we combine people's talents. Maybe everyone that's participated gets together and makes one big short kind of thing. But I think at some point it would be great if as we're taking these small steps towards getting confident, that turns into something as well. So I think like everything, it'll change, it'll evolve, but we just got to keep improving our process and the way we manage it, and the way we communicate the expectations as well. I think that the constraints themselves are interesting as well. We've tried to really be disciplined about limiting it to 4 days, but some folks really like poured their weekends into it. They did all kinds of stuff behind the scenes kind of thing, which is their prerogative, but it's a lot of work. Like, it's a lot of work. So it's just about getting everyone to understand, like, can you do something interesting but simple?
Right. So your idea of also incorporating this is kind of to build up a different kind of atmosphere within the studio itself to that would draw into those IPs and the development of things.
Well, again, if it's one thing to do a short or something like this, but it's another thing to then find yourself running a show, or because ultimately we would like our storytellers to be able to run their own shows and to lead from the front, right, kind of thing. But I think it's unfair just to throw someone in there, because it's pretty intense. It's an intense environment where you're getting questions every hour from all kinds of people. You've got to deal with networks. There's all kinds of like layers of like communication skills that perhaps you don't have yet and you need to learn. When I talk about me coming from a construction site and ending up in an animation studio, I literally did not have the vocabulary to communicate with people. I just, I came from a monosyllabic construction site. It's like, we're not exactly expressing ourselves in complex ways, and
there's 5 words we use.
Yeah, exactly, pretty much it. And so then all of a sudden you have to get nuance, and you have to get
Totally,
you have to get specific about things and change the way you address people, and that's they're learnable skills, but you have to give people the opportunity to do that. And so even this idea of pitch me your little short idea and then work with a team to make it, and then I'll try and do a little interview at the end. So all pieces of it are about preparing you for what would come next if you made your own show. Because at some point you'll have to pitch it. At some point you'll have to talk to a client. At some point you'll have to talk about your process, the way you go about it, brief a team, all that kind of stuff. These are soft skills that we don't get taught.
Totally. I love this. It's almost like, I'm maybe like a biz dev person, and I never, ever get to dive into this world. And even when I'm at home trying to do it myself, I don't know where to start, or like, I don't know these things. But like coming into work and working with the other teammates and consulting with people with a specific directive and having company time to do that is amazing. I love that. So like, would a giant success for you, it sounds like, one of these creators ends up pitching and like show running, or just kind of spanning outside of their territory from this project?
Not even, to be honest. I feel like if someone comes out of this and they feel energized, they feel re-energized about their job, maybe, or even just to get back onto that webcomic they've been doing, or they get that boost again. It was like, oh, that thing I put down, I haven't looked at it again. Like, that's a success for me, right? Like, if we get someone to pitch us, like, quote unquote, pitch a show thing or whatever, then that's great too, but that's not the goal. The goal, that, like, again, this is about retaining people, not rights. This is about building a culture of empathy as well, for people to understand each other. Like, the way I saw that team bonding, and the way I saw that group that was making those first shorts supporting each other, like, that's a win for me. Like, that's huge. It's just huge.
I love that. So tell me a little bit more about why you are pursuing this, because you started off as an animator, a creator making things, and now you're more of management and building other people up. So when did that change happen? How? And what are your aspirations for taking this path?
Yeah, so I mean, it happened incrementally, like as I think for everybody, but like the first step was going through that experience on Robot Boy, and then just thinking to myself afterwards, hang on, there's things I don't understand about this. Could we not have addressed some of these issues before we started the production, you know? And then I was like, oh, what's this whole development thing? And then a lot of my friends were starting in in the Cartoon Network development studio in London, and we were talking a lot about it. And you know, I even went over there for a while to have a look at it and see, see what was going on. And there was some pretty amazing talent there. But I think that the main thing was I was getting more and more curious about like what do I need to do to become first of all a better director, because I felt like obviously directing there's a managerial component. So I was like, I need to get better at communicating and expressing myself. But then when I got into development and I discovered the whole writing aspect of it in an in-depth way, because I dabbled a bit with it with with the writers on Robot Boy, and interestingly enough, they've both gone on to do pretty amazing things. Mike, I think, he's been head writer, even I think he's maybe even executive producer on Loud House Forever at Nick, and like he's doing amazing things. So Mike Rabuna, and so they introduced me to it, and they allowed me to dabble in writing a little bit, which is very kind of them. But when I got into development, I really started to see all these other components. You know, there's the sales aspect of it, the pitching aspect of it, the obviously the writing of scripts obviously is one thing, but writing Bibles, writing concepts, writing character descriptions, building characters, building things from nothing, and then obviously creating the artwork that goes with it. But all of that stuff, it was like, oh, there's no school for this. Like, there's no school for this. How do I get better at this? What do I have to do? So that's when it started, and then I got curious about it, and then I started to learn that there were whole other industries that I didn't know about, like the product design industry, the digital product design industry, sorry, in the UK. Was huge, and Us2 became a point of reference for me. The first time I visited Us2, it just blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, I've never seen anything like this. I was like, oh, so this is what they mean when they talk about creative studios. Like, this is a creative studio. I've never seen this before. Like, honestly, after going to Us2 and I came back to animation studios, I was like, animation studios look like literally like factory farms,
Oh no.
like very like I was just, this doesn't make any sense. This doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah,
So
totally. Yeah, 100%.
so I was like, I have to change this somehow. I have to try and have a positive influence on this somehow. And so, if not for myself, then for everybody else, I have to try and do something. And so, and obviously there were ups and downs, and I got disheartened, and it was like struggle. It was a struggle for the longest time. I mean, the first time I mentioned a writing room in Paris, because I was like, I want to get people uh, working together and collaborating together. I think I was almost like I was almost guillotined. I think it was because it was I was so naive about the rights component that went along with that, and there was all kinds of like rebellious kind of complaining about that idea about having people work together. Now it's commonplace, but at the time it was such a rebellious act. Everyone was like, "What the hell are you doing?" I mean, I remember a friend of mine from a network who shall be unnamed called me and said, "I got this funny email from the Writers Guild saying that you should be blacklisted. What have you done?" And I was like, "What do you mean? What have I
Wow.
done?" Oh, it was totally absurd. But I mean, there's all kinds of like nonsense like that went on in all kinds of different areas. But the point is that I was learning, and I was because again that I was like, okay, what could I have done differently, and how could that have gone better? And I keep trying to think of like, okay, what what am I naive to? What am I not sort of aware of? What do I need to get better at? And that's led me to this place of accepting the fact that I can get as much satisfaction from being a creative manager as I could once from animating a scene or doing a
Wow.
drawing, or and also accepting. And this is I don't know, have you read The Fountainhead?
No, I haven't.
So there's a book called The Fountainhead, and which is a controversial book, but there's two characters in there. There's Peter Keating, I think his name is, and Howard Rourke, and it's this idea of this uncompromising creative and this kind of like corporate sellout guy. And there's always this question of like, what profile are you? And then there's another there's a critic, I think, that's making this commentary over both of these profiles. But anyway, the critic guy says that you should never pursue your passion because you'll become incredibly unhappy as a human being. You'll always be unhappy, right? And for me, like getting to a place where I can really like commit to my day job and really work very hard at trying to be the best I can in that job, and then leave my artwork to my hobby where I can get my personal satisfaction out of it, but not have any commercial entanglement. Like there's something really nice about that.
I mean, yeah, I guess I don't have super experience in both worlds, but I can totally see that. You know, as soon as you get commercialism involved in your dreams, it turns it into something else that, you know, you weren't intending, I guess. So
Totally, and I think that being able to keep those two things separate, from me anyway, I think it's actually been a really healthy thing. And I think that there was even when I finally left Gorillaz, like Gorillaz expanded to the point where they recruited a new team in Los Angeles, and you know, and Nicola and the team that started there were incredibly like gentle in that transition, and you know, it was a big moment for me where I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do? What do I want to do now? When I finally made the choice to leave, you know, I was very much exhausted after like 10 years of struggle, and or even more. And I was like, well, what am I going to do now? Like, you know, do I go back to directing? Do I go back to like, you know, maybe even like storyboarding on something or whatever, just to get back into like the creative side of things? Because I was, you know, still always doing it, you know,
yeah,
and you know, I really had to choose. And I think that was the moment that really crystallized everything for me. I was like, okay, no, now that I have the opportunity to choose, I choose the other thing. So
yeah,
because I was like, okay, I kind of incrementally ended up in this place, and then I was like, but I never chose this because this thing didn't exist when I was dabbling in it. You know, when I was trying to figure it out, the chief content officer, the VP of creative, that kind of stuff. That's not where I started. You know, I ended up there, but I didn't consciously choose it. You know, it was just kind of something that happened over the years. And then, you know, as you're trying to make more of a positive impact, people give you more responsibility, and they're like, well, now you can do this, and now you can do that, and all this is working, so do more of that. But you're like, oh, I guess I need to keep doing this because this is where I was heading, right? But when you stop for a minute and then you get to choose, it's interesting what you end up choosing. And for me, you know, I don't say it lightly when I say that the mission for me is to create a safe place to be creative and a creative place to do business. I feel like that's going to propel us all forward.
I love that. Do you ever see yourself going back to animation or storyboarding or whatnot?
Sure, I think I definitely will. I think I'll definitely do it, but again, I'll probably just do it at home.
Totally. I mean, from this chat, you sound like somebody who's very driven by their internal, you know, I don't know a good way of saying it, but like almost your heart. Like even where you ended up now and what you just said to me, where you want to create something that builds up others, essentially. I think that's incredible and amazing. And it sounds like you're exactly, you know, with the right studio having the right opportunity to do that right now. How do you see that, you know, say you reach a point on your current path where you feel comfortable again? How do you see this kind of aspiration of yours turning into something bigger or in a different path in the rest of your career? You know, like you say you figured out at Mercury Filmworks how to create this internal atmosphere. Is that fulfilling for you for, you know, staying in that space, or do you want to turn this into like something bigger, change the industry a little bit more?
I think it'll change. It'll evolve. It'll change. You know, nothing ever stays the same. And I think, in all things being equal, I mean, for me, if I do my job correctly, someone will want my job at some point. You know, someone will maybe even turn up that's better than me at this job. You know,
Yeah.
and that probably will happen. You know, and there'll be some kind of evolution, and it's happened to me a bunch of times before, and it's okay. It's totally okay. Like I remember a person that worked with me early on at Gaumont. You know, she was very frustrated and I couldn't figure out what it was. And then we had a meeting, we were talking about it, and I said, oh, what you're describing is you want my job. Like you're just frustrated because you feel like you can do it better than me, and you want my job, which was maybe fair enough because she's a French speaker. You know, I wasn't a fluent French speaker. I was doing my best, but by no means as fluent. And so I said, well, okay, that sounds like a legit plan. So let's make a plan for how you can get it. I said, but I'm using it right now, so you can't have it today. But
So one is
what,
murder.
no, I was like, so what you need is an autonomous project. I said, you feel like I'm like some kind of glass ceiling in your way. So let's slip you out from there, like move transversely in the company or horizontally in the company, and then we'll give you your own project where you can shine and you can make a case for taking the job. You know, and when I left, she was the first to take it.
You sound like somebody who's able to kind of tap into other people's what they desire and their wants and needs and whatever, and kind of help them get there. That to me, that sounds incredible.
Well, I just, I think people have done it from me over the years, and kind of shown me, back to like come full circle back to that apprenticeship. Like Andrew, he did it for me, and maybe that's where, maybe that's where all this comes from. Or I just felt like he did such an incredible service for me that and also I think it's not completely altruistic. It's not an altruistic thing because it also it's I think it's really, really rewarding. You get so much out of it. Like it's addictive. You get so much out of seeing people shine and grow and succeed, and you're just like, I mean, it's not like they don't need to call it out or whatever, but you just there like watching it, and you're like, oh man, that's amazing. It just totally came together. The thing we were trying to do, it's come together, and then it's, I don't know, it's going to sound a little bit like romantic, I guess, but it's just that whole thing of like maybe not everything's wrong in the world when that kind of happens. It's like, okay, well, you know what? It's pretty cool.
I love that. And you have some clear stories. I mean, and following up with people, that's great. So I'm wondering, like, maybe looking at your whole career in general, what are kind of the things that's keeping you going in animation? Because you started off very adamant about getting into animation and having this big dream, and then pursuing that and giving up everything a couple times to risk it all and go forward, and then, finding your expertise and then moving around, et cetera. Like, what has been the underlying thing that's kept you in this industry? Like, what you just described to me, you can do in any industry. Doesn't even have to be animation. You could do live action, for instance, if you still want to stay in storytelling, or, writing, or you could even do it in a cabinetry business, go back to your roots, like, what is keeping you here? Is it familiarity, or is it the love of the craft?
That's a really good question. I think that, and it's something I think about a lot. And it's funny because I did a whole bunch of training. I did a fair amount of training, and when I was just after Gorillaz, I went to Berlin to a company called AJ and Smart. Shout out to AJ and Smart, they're amazing. Where I learned all about facilitation and design sprints, and I actually have used that a lot in the way I work with artists and development as well. And I have thought about that a lot, where I'm like, actually, I think that is like, it's magical, that whole thing. And I was like, okay, and it applies to any industry, right? And once you understand the management of creative process, then that creative process, which ultimately for me is finding meaningful problems and trying to solve them, that's pretty much used anywhere, And so I've thought about that a lot. And I think that the answer is simply, I love animation. I think it's a still somewhat young art form, which is, it's growing, I think, at an accelerated rate now, thanks to the S4 boom and the realization that you can tell all kinds of stories with animation and not just like children's stories. So it's definitely growing now more than it ever has, but it's still a young art form, and there's so much to be done. And as technology grows, I think the stories we can tell will continue to evolve. So there's that for sure. But then I think the other thing is that it takes a certain kind of person, like you, like meeting people like you. For me, it's so fulfilling. Like, I love to meet interesting people that, they genuinely like move me. Like it's something that makes me feel connected to the world, and I that's something I love about it, is the people.
Amazing. Yeah, totally. And I feel like animators are kind of unique people of
Totally.
many other industries, because, there's a lot of, they're doing it from the heart, everybody has a place in their childhood where they saw the magic and they wanted to tell their own stories. And animation is like a really amazing medium that allows people to do that. That doesn't exist in, there's live action, there's stories and stuff, but animation somehow, you can bring your imagination and make it come to life. Amazing. I don't want to take your whole day. I've super enjoyed chatting with you, but I'm wondering, as we're wrapping up, is there anything that you wanted to share for those listening to what we've been talking about?
I guess the one thing is that if you feel stuck,
totally.
if you feel stuck, just try and ask yourself, a couple of simple questions, like, what would it look like if it was simple? The other question to ask yourself is, what can I do with what I have, not what I wish I had? And then lastly, ask yourself, why not me? Why not now?
The last one specifically is what really helped drive me into animation myself. I was like, why can't I be part of this industry? Like I see other people and like, what do they have that I don't? I don't know. It's just they're doing it and I'm not. The second question about what can I do with what I have, not I wish I had, is that more about doing like a realistic assessment of my current opportunities and skills instead of being like, if only I was really good at, storyboarding, I'd be able to do this versus like I'm a viz dev artist.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also a lot of people, like, they're feeding into Instagram and other kind of platforms like that are just feeding, they're feeding into like the best of the best of the best that maybe took 10 years to get there or whatever it is. And they're saying, oh, I can't do this thing because I don't have that, or I can't make this film, I can't tell the story because I need to get better at viz dev, so I'll do a schoolism course, and then I'll wait another 3 years, and then I'll have another look at it, and I can't do this other thing because I need this thing, and oh, now the technology's changed, there's new software I have to learn, and so I can't do that. And I can't. So you could do that forever, right? And
well, as soon as you begin, you're already behind. Like
right. And I think at some point you just have to get started with whatever it is you have, and whether it's plastic cups, stop motion plastic cups in a hotel room like I did once, or whatever it is, just get in and make something. Just make something, and then I guarantee you will learn a ton from doing that.
I think everybody should watch your plastic cup hotel room, and I'm gonna include a link to it. I think that's great.
Terrifyingly embarrassing, but it was funny.
No, it's exactly a testament to what you just said. Like you're in a situation, and you. So, for those that don't know, you made a stop motion animation using plastic cups, where you drew the faces on the cups for the expressions, and because you were traveling around a lot at the time, you got the Uber drivers to do the voices. So you literally said, like, what do I have access to in these hotel rooms or whatever I am to make an animation, and you like did it. And I think it's incredible, and you can watch this silly animation and be like, oh my goodness, the voices are actually pretty funny, and like the animation is pretty good, and like
it's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting experiment, but I think it was, having done that experiment as well, it did prove to myself that, what, if I keep asking myself the question of what does it look like if it's simple, and and I download Vine and I do these little stop motion things with cups and roll up paper faces inside them, okay, it looks kind of shitty, but it gets the point across, right? And then you're just trying to demonstrate something that maybe you can do in a much more sophisticated way after you've finished it and you've figured out a whole bunch of stuff about the story, about whatever it is. And for me, it's the principle of when we're pitching something as well, I was like, let's pull it together quickly and tell the story, and then we'll iterate, right? We'll figure out what worked, what didn't work, and we iterate.
Totally. I love it. And so final words are those 3 questions to ask yourself if you feel stuck. Anything else you want to end on?
No, just thanks so much for having me. I mean, I think your story is incredible. I don't know if anyone's interviewed you, but they should. And big up to Silly Duck Wizard. Love it.
Well, Heath, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure, and I'm so happy we got to do this like full circle thing. It's been really fun, like listening to your journey, and I think it's incredible some of the risks and steps you took to make what you're doing now happen. And I really feel like internally what you're doing is good. Like I'm very happy about it, and I'm going to take over your job now that I know all about it. So
yay, great.
Be prepared for that.
Do it. All
right, thanks, Heath. And if you're listening and you want to get in touch or reach out to Heath or follow his work, we agreed ahead of time that we were going to just say that you should step out of your door and like yell his name, because he's everywhere. But just look him up on the internet. Just type in Heath Kenny and you'll find him. And other than that, check out the description of this video for the link to the paper or the plastic cup animation that he made. Check that out. And that's all for now. Thank you so much for listening. Okay, bye. The music for this podcast was composed by Will Farmer and the graphics by Daniel Abensauer. I encourage you to look them up if you enjoyed their work.